Ever since The Last Airbender ended, there's been one long-standing fan theory that's bigger than the rest. Like, we're talking about an Appa-sized fan theory here. I'm obviously talking about the Sokka and Toph relationship. Fans like to point out the numerous examples throughout The Last Airbender that suggest Sokka and Toph had a serious connection, and even though Sokka seemed to happily end up with Suki, there's always been those pushing for the Toph and Sokka relationship, or Tokka as it's better known. And then in Legend of Korra, when it was revealed that Toph's second daughter Suyin was only half-sisters with Lin, and Suyin's father wasn't named, it sent fans, and me, into a jet-like stupor. But where does this theory actually come from, and more importantly, could it possibly be true? Maybe. I'd bet my last White Lotus piece on it. Let me explain right now. I'm about to fill you in on one of the greatest love stories of all time that saw a stubborn, prideful Water Tribe boy and a stubborn, prideful earthbending girl embark on a globe-trotting adventure that saw more sparks than the Fire Nation on the 4th of July. Because nothing says young love quite like traveling around the world together, right? Of course, I'm talking about Sokka and Toph's romantic few months together that saw them visit exotic locales filled with sandy beaches, sandy deserts, and probably a lot of cabbages. Yep, nothing else important was going on during this period of time. Oh, right, besides the whole training the Avatar to defeat the Fire Lord and save the world thing. But that storyline was more in the background, while the real focus was on Sokka and Toph's blossoming romance. Okay, I know that's not true. I know I sound crazier than Hama on a full moon. So let me tone it down a bit. Yes, the show never explicitly had Sokka and Toph get together, but that hasn't stopped fans from pointing out all the tiny examples in The Last Airbender that seem to suggest some sort of an attraction between the two of them, at least on Toph's side. Just look at the way Toph acts in the Serpent's Pass episode for just one example. The gang is traveling along the Serpent's Pass, which I forget why they name it that again. Oh yeah, because there's a giant serpent thing blocking the pass. Ah, I get it, the name makes perfect sense now. Anyways, the gang is attacked by this creature and Toph falls in the water. Now, Toph is usually the most powerful person in any situation, but being a blind earthbender, her and water go together like Zuko and laughter, meaning you just don't see it working together. Toph immediately starts to drown, and when Suki rescues her, Toph thinks it's Sokka, thanks him with a tone we haven't heard from her before, and she kisses Suki's cheek. Of course, she's embarrassed when she finds out it's not Sokka who rescued her. But this scene is interesting for a lot of different reasons. Let's put on our analytical caps for a second. Yes, my analytical cap is just a melon with a face painted on it like the Melon Lord, thank you for asking. Anyways, this scene could be read in a few different ways. You could think that Toph's attitude and sudden outburst of affection is just because she was in danger and then was saved, but I'm not so sure. We've seen Toph in dozens of crazy tough situations, and she's never reacted like that before. It feels more like her letting her guard down and letting her true feelings for Sokka be known. Plus, why would you think it was Sokka who saved her anyway? Could it be that she already had romantic thoughts about Sokka and her mind immediately jumped to him? So I call that Exhibit A. Exhibit B happens in the episode Sokka's Master in Season 3. After Sokka spends some time with his sword master, something is definitely clear to the rest of the group. They need Sokka. Without him, they can't read a map, don't have a plan, and Katara is forced to try to be the funny one, which goes about as well as that time a young Zuko spoke out at his first Fire Nation War meeting. When Sokka returns to the group, everyone is happy to see him. Even though Toph says she didn't care about him not being there, she turns away and blushes. Toph blushes. That doesn't happen often. It definitely feels like she's harboring some feelings there. And there's a lot of tiny examples like that build up to one big conclusion. Appa ate Momo. Wait, no, sorry, wrong accusation. I meant to say Toph has a huge crush on Sokka. And now you're saying, hey, dude who's wearing a melon on his head, so what? Sokka was in love with Suki. He didn't feel the same way about Toph. But think of what we know about Sokka's character. He's a brilliant strategist, but not so good at reading feelings. He liked Suki at first, then fell in love with the moon, and then fell back in love with Suki again, all in the course of like a year. I'm just saying the guy has liked a lot of girls who've smiled at him, when really he should be looking at the one girl who's been by his side almost the whole time. Because come on, Sokka and Toph make a lot of sense. He's ridiculously goofy and she's straightforward and not afraid to call him out when he's messed up. Both are stubborn to a fault, and although they'll bicker, the respect these two have for each other is undeniable. And overall, it's all these little interactions in The Last Airbender that set the stage for the future when Sokka potentially fathered Toph's second child, Suyin. So now here's the big question. What could have happened between the events of The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra that could warrant these two getting together and making a kid? Does the timing even work out? Okay, let's break down what we know timeline-wise. We know that Lin Beifong, Toph's eldest child, is around 50 years old when Korra starts, which is 70 years after the end of The Last Airbender. Toph was about 12 in the original show, which means she had Lin 20 years after the show ended. We know that Suyin is 6 years younger than Lin, which means 26 years after the end of the first show, Suyin was born. Ah, gosh, I wish I was a math bender. Do you think 26 years is enough time for the Sokka and Suki relationship to end? I definitely think so. Let's look at some options about what happened with Sokka and Suki. Some are good, some are a little sad. Let's get the sad one out of the way first. Maybe Suki didn't live that long of a life. She did have a dangerous job after all, and although I would never bet against Suki in a fight, you never know sometimes. The most tragic ending would be if Suki met an early demise and after a few years of grieving, Sokka finally got together with Toph. I mean, Toph would be a free agent at this time. She's only talked about Lin's father once. We know his name was Kanto, and although Toph said he was a nice man, she said it just didn't work out. Clearly, there was not a lot of love there, and we've seen Sokka move on from love pretty easily, so it could happen. But let's say Suki survived, which is a much better scenario. Why did Sokka and Suki eventually break up? Was it because of his lame jokes? His inability to make a proper sand sculpture of Suki? Was it because Suki realized that Sokka couldn't love anything more than he loved his trusty boomerang? Probably not. A simple answer would just be that things didn't work out. Suki was a Kyoshi Warrior, and I don't think she'd ever stop doing that. Sokka became one of the United Republic Council's chairman, which probably meant he had to be there in the city a lot. A long-distance relationship is hard, and although the creators once joked that Sokka and Suki retired in the suburbs where nothing happened to them, does that really make sense for the characters? Maybe they tried retiring for a bit, but the call of action was just too strong, and both of them could have ended up going their separate ways. If they did break up, I would be sad, but would hope they could move on with other people. You know, there is a question about who Zuko actually ended up with, and there's a comic series set after The Last Airbender that sees Suki hired to protect Zuko after a few assassination attempts, and the two of them get pretty close. Maybe Suki ended up with Zuko, and then Sokka, who would start working as the representative and chairman of the Southern Water Tribe in Republic City, would be much closer to Toph, who would be the chief of police there in the city. And after all that will they won't they tension of their childhoods, plus both being single adults, one thing leads to another and boom, Toph is pregnant with her second child Suyin. Or if you want to, we could throw out a crazy option just for fun, because those are some of my favorites. Sokka has had bad luck with women, right? His last girlfriend turned into the moon. Man, that's rough, buddy. So let's just assume that Suki was actually some sort of reincarnated spirit of Avatar Kyoshi, and she had to turn herself into one of those fan weapon things in order to save Kyoshi Island from being destroyed in a volcano. Okay, fine, that would be the least likely option, but let's not rule that out completely, okay? Because overall, this theory at least makes a little sense. Sure, us fans like to look for any possibility that this might be true, and to try to justify certain scenes to make them fit within our theory. But doesn't it feel like the creators are trolling us just a little bit in order to keep the speculation alive? Like when we first met Lin and saw her interact with Toph, there was a big joke about who her dad was. Bolin straight up asked Toph who it was, causing a look of pure rage from Lin. Toph then explained how her father was Kanto. That scene felt more like the show winking at us, like, hey, you know that fan theory you love? This is it, we're gonna answer it. Boom, denied. And that could have been the end of it. But when Suyin was introduced, they made it a point to make her only half-sisters with Lin, and Suyin's father wasn't named. Why would they do that if not to keep hope alive? Yes, it added to the complex relationship between Lin and Suyin, with them only being half-sisters growing up with Toph as a mom, but was the half-sister part really that necessary? So could this theory actually be true? I definitely think it could be. I'm not saying it is, but it definitely could be. There's enough evidence to at least consider the possibility. Now, do I think we'll ever get full-on confirmation? No, probably not. It's just too much fun letting fans ponder and discuss this theory rather than straight up answering it. And that's fine. I'll continue to think that this is true while also focusing on coming up with other crazy theories. Like, did you hear about how the cabbage vendor's grandson became the next Avatar? Okay, fine, that one's not true, I just made it up. Back to the drawing board. So what do you think? Do you think Sokka is Suyin's father? Tell us whether you agree or not in the comments, and tell us your favorite Avatar fan theories while hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for watching CBR. See you next time, and remember, don't drink the cactus juice.